How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Perfect Reload Weekly, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, and I am joined, as always, by the most satanic, possessed, open box television purchase I have ever met in my life, Christian Slater. Christian, how you doing this week?
I'm stroked out on fentanyl-laced chewy bars. I'm ready to clang and bang, putting up half-ton squats until my nose leaks. My American Coca-Cola operation is on the move. I'm expanding into new territories.
What are you on? Did you get into the chewy bars? They sent me an email. I got an email from Instacart telling me my granola bars might be laced with something. Did you get in? You on that? You on that double chocolate chip? You on that? Did Daddy have some double chocolate chip? Fun times around here at the moon base, I can tell you that. All right, so the channel, a lot going on this week. Lots of new subscribers. How you doing, everybody? It was a big week on the channel this week for a multitude of reasons. We did our Game of the Year. Our year-end awards happened on, well, we filmed it a week ago, but it went up this past Friday. Myself and friend Davis talking about our favorite songs, albums, games of the year, as well as our patented, traditional, signature, patent-pending Perfect Reload year-end awards. Congratulations to all the winners. Some amazing games came out this year, and yeah, it was a really fun recording to do. I was exhausted by the end of it. I'm sure Davis was probably tired as well. You know, it was almost 4 hours, but obviously we were going for longer than that because, you know, we would take a break and all that stuff, you know. It was fun. It was fun to really look back on what was a really great year for music and for games. And I talked about this. I'll get into this real quick before we get into the games this year. I talked about, you know, we didn't talk about movies or TV shows from 2023 because, you know, we just don't, myself personally, I just don't keep current with a lot of that stuff. But I figured I would real quickly go through a couple of the things that I did like this year. Was I realized that in last year's year-end video, I did kind of toss out a couple of things. So for movies, I actually quit. I mean, John Wick 4 was fantastic. Tetris. I actually really liked Evil Dead Rise. I've actually watched it a couple of times since I saw it because I'm a sports fan, and, you know, I always like movies based on a true story, especially when it combines sports and true story stuff. Air was pretty solid. I was surprised how much I liked No Hard Feelings. Barbie was pretty good. I just watched Oppenheimer a couple nights ago and enjoyed that. And then for TV shows, I want to say, I think the only show I watch that actually had a season come out this year was The Bear. And season 2 of The Bear was fantastic, but I don't think, was there a Cobra Kai season this year? Was that 2023? No, it was last year. Okay, so yeah, there was no Cobra Kai. So I don't think there were any current shows that I watch. I only watch a small handful, aside from The Bear that had a new season this year. So yeah, that's, you know, pretty small kind of short list, but, you know, figure I'd toss that stuff in there before we get into to what's going on in the world of video games. And I guess we'll kind of start it off with Alan Wake 2. So I did finish Alan Wake 2. I mentioned this last week. Wasn't sure if I was going to be able to finish it, if I was going to have to resort to watching like a playthrough to get through it. But I really just wanted to kind of push through it before we recorded the Game of the Year stuff. And I didn't finish the game until after we had already filmed, but I was confident enough that where it landed on my list, I felt confident even not having wrapped up the game. But I really enjoyed it. From a story perspective, gameplay perspective, it's not really my thing. I pushed through it because I was enjoying the story so much, and I was enjoying the overall look and feel of the game. But I'm not a survival horror type person. I don't particularly like having to go to like a safe room to be able to save my game. I don't like having to do a lot of resource management type stuff and the limited inventory type stuff. And I get that that's what a lot of people really like in that genre, because I understand the purpose. It provides some extra attention and just kind of makes you feel like you are having to survive. Like it is, not everything is limitless. So I understand that, but it's not necessarily my cup of tea. But from a story perspective, I think I was a little worried because, spoiler alert, if you didn't watch the year-end awards, I ended up giving best story to Spider-Man 2. I didn't do runner-ups or anything, but in my mind it would have been Alan Wake 2. And I was kind of thinking to myself as I was getting into this game, I was like, man, was I wrong? Like, should it have been Alan Wake 2 instead? And then like as the game was getting closer and closer to its climax and everything that happened, they actually end up changing the ending a little bit because they put out their new game plus mode just this past week, and they actually added some extra stuff. So I actually went, because I wasn't going to play the game all over again, I just went on YouTube and watched the new ending. It gives you a little bit more of a happy ending, or less ambiguous ending to a degree, I guess. I don't want to say that the story falls apart in Alan Wake 2. I don't think it ever does. But I think that there are points in that game where it gets a little bit too convoluted. And I don't want to say like too up its own ass, because it's like way too negative of a connotation that I want to provide to that. But it definitely gets a little bit... It's a little bit up its own ass, it just kind of does. But it's like, it's not like that bad, right? But I truly believe now, having finished the game, and I was not somebody that played Alan Wake 1, and so I've been diving into the game a little bit more from, like a making of perspective, just kind of through my YouTube watching over the past week since I finished it, watching interviews of Sam Lake and interviews with some of the actors and just kind of how they did some stuff. And I watched a couple interviews with Sam Lake where people asked him the question, like, do you need to play Alan Wake 1 in order to really enjoy this game and understand this game? And he says no, and I think that's a straight up lie. I watched a pretty thorough recap of Alan Wake and all the DLC and the expansion and the stuff that happens in Control. And I watched one that was just made by somebody on YouTube. I watched one that was done by, I think, GameSpot. And then I watched the one that Sam Lake himself did, which I think was in conjunction with IGN. So I felt like I was fairly like up to speed as I was going through the game, but there were multiple times towards the end of the game where they were introducing characters where I was like, I don't remember this, and I had to Google a lot of stuff to get context. So I think personally it is not a factual statement to say that you can completely understand this game without having played the first one. I think the first one is kind of mandatory. You need to have some type of working knowledge of the greater Alan Wake universe in order to really kind of get this game. But that's not to say that the game's not enjoyable. It's a visual feast. It's an absolute spectacle. It's one of the best looking games I've ever seen in my life. Not just from like a pure like horsepower graphical perspective. If you're running this thing on max settings on a real tricked out rig, but just like the way they blend and blur the line between what is computer generated and what is live action, I think is just some really amazing stuff. And I think that they should be incredibly proud of the work that they did on this game, because it is truly a one of a kind experience. There's really nothing else like it out there, and it leaves me very excited to see what they have on the horizon over at Remedy. I know they're working on multiple projects. They haven't come out straight and said we are working on Control 2, but I ended up, when I was going through some of those behind the scenes things, I ended up just finding some videos about, a day in the life at Remedy Entertainment. And there were multiple times there where they were talking to people. They're like, yeah, we're currently working on, the next entry in the Control series. And it's like, okay, they are obviously working on it. We know that they're also working on the remasters for Max Payne 1 and 2, and then like an untitled, I think it has like a code name assigned to it. That's another game. But I have to imagine that eventually they're going to really do a crossover game. I can see, I don't know if they're going to do Alan Wake 3, but I could see them doing Control 2 and then doing like the here's everything all kind of merging together in this universe that we have created. I think that's probably like the end game with all this. And then I'd like to kind of see them, go off and do something else. I think that they could probably wrap the story up pretty well, and they can always revisit it down the line. But I did overall enjoy my time with Alan Wake 2. I just, it was difficult to play at times, and makes me wish that it had some. It would take up. I think it would take away too much from the survival horror aspect of it. But I wish it maybe had some greater accessibility options, like stuff like The Last of Us has had, and I guess a little bit of foreshadowing for what we're going to talk about later, but a little bit of what Control had, and make it just a little bit more palatable, a little bit easier. Maybe that's something they eventually patch into the game. I'm not sure, but when I finished the game, I kind of was like, well, I really kind of want to play something else that these people have made. And as far as I know, Max Payne 1 and 2 is not something that's like super easily available, at least without having to spend money on it. And I had played Quantum Break at some point and didn't really dig it. And then I was like, well, when Control came out, I only played a little bit of Control. I bought it the day it came out, but it just didn't really click with me, and I just didn't really care for it too much. But now that I'm a little bit more invested into everything that's going on, I'd like to give it another shot. And it's available on PlayStation Plus. And so I decided to download it, and I've already played way past where I was when I bought it when it came out. And I played several hours of it. I don't know, creeping towards the halfway mark of the game. And there's so much of that game that I didn't remember because I only played it in that kind of brief instance when it first came out. And looking back on it, I really only played kind of like a couple hours of it. There were moments that I certainly remember. There's a couple of the early missions that I definitely remember, and there are aspects like cleansing the control points and, the astral plane stuff. And I remember that stuff, but I kind of didn't really realize like how much of what they were doing was blending some of the live action stuff and just their overall method of storytelling. You really see that it's like the prototype for Alan Wake 2. You can kind of see that they were drawing from a lot of this stuff, and they were going to go full hog with it in Alan Wake 2, which they absolutely did. So it's kind of cool to see some of those things, carry over, and you can see where they had like the genesis of an idea and were able to turn it into something much larger for the next game. But the biggest problem I have with Control is still the biggest problem I had with it when it first came out, and that's just the way the game, for lack of a better term, controls. It just, I don't really like the way the character Jesse just feels when you're moving around. Some of the aiming mechanics, it just feels like I'm, having a hard time aiming. I've had to mess with the stick sensitivity several times to try and get it into a sweet spot. But I am really enjoying it, and I'm taking advantage of those accessibility options that are in there. You can turn on like the immortality. You can turn on. Oh, there's a whole bunch of options. I think one of them's like, then there's like sliders for how much damage you deal or how much damage an enemy deals. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. And those were the things I was kind of surprised that Alan Wake 2 didn't have. Although with Control being much more of a kind of a straightforward action game, I think that if you had some of those accessibility options in Alan Wake 2, it would take away from the overall thing. But I think having an immortality option in Alan Wake 2 would be fine, because you would still have all the inventory management. You'd still be solving the puzzles, and combat would still be mostly the same. I mean, you just wouldn't be able to die, but you would still have that resource management aspect of it. So like I said, maybe that's something that gets put in later, but having those in Control has been really nice because it allows me to just kind of enjoy the story and kind of get lost in the story. I'm kind of in just this mindset of this whole, kind of offbeat, trippy kind of thing, having done Alan Wake 2, and I listen to the Nextlander Watchcast where they, every Monday if you remember their Patreon, they watch like a movie or a television show and talk about it. They're back to doing Twin Peaks. They did all of Twin Peaks season 1. I've never seen Twin Peaks before. I know Twin Peaks is a huge influence for a lot of the Remedy stuff. And so I watched the first season of Twin Peaks when they were doing their podcast. Now they're doing season 2. So I've been watching season 2 of Twin Peaks. So it's just kind of like, well, I guess if this is what I'm watching right now for a TV show, and these are the games I'm playing, I might as well just go all the way in. And so, yeah, I imagine over the next week or two, I'll probably wrap Control up. I'm just, in between rounds of Call of Duty, I don't necessarily feel like playing it for so long every night. It's like, all right, let me turn that game off and flip to a half hour of Control or something like that, and working my way through it. But yeah, it's definitely, you see that where they're going, which leads me to believe that whatever they're going to do next is going to be some really interesting stuff. And I think what you're going to see in the next Control is obviously they're still going to keep it that kind of look and feel, I think, with like the brutalist architecture, most likely, unless they take the game out into the open world, which they certainly could. Maybe they don't want to have 2 games in a row that take place in this, government building. But I think the use of the FMV stuff, kind of in its, chrysalis form, in Control, and seeing it bloom and burst and be birthed all over the place in Alan Wake 2, I think you're going to see a lot of that in the next Control. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with all of it, because I think Remedy I think they're on fire right now. And it's sad because I saw there were some reports that came out that Alan Wake 2 sold like abysmally, like it was like a really poor selling game. And I think that's probably a couple of aspects which are kind of a harsh reality. I think number one, which is the one that people don't want to talk about, is the fact that it didn't come out on physical media. I know people that didn't buy it because it didn't come out on physical media. I get that we are shifting to an ever likely future of digital only, but there are still people out there that buy physical media, and it is one of those things where it's like somebody walks into a Best Buy or a GameStop, and I know people on the internet like to laugh, like, oh, those people don't exist anymore. Like, who does that? People do that, and to walk into a game store and be like, I would like a copy of Alan Wake 2, sir. And they're like, that game isn't out physically. You can only buy it digitally. Oh, okay. Well, can I buy a PlayStation Network card? We don't sell those anymore. They're just like one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, well, all right. And, it's, that is kind of does put some people off. And I think the other thing is the fact that it is a sequel to a 13-year-old game that not a lot of people played in the first place, because this game has so much going on with a story that is so directly tied to that game. It is difficult to just jump in both feet forward and be like, yeah, I'm going to play this sequel to this game I never heard of, or this game I never played, or like, I think maybe I like that game a little bit. I don't know. I don't remember. And get right into it. And it is, it's like I said, it's like a fucking tome of trying to make heads or tails of what's going on at times, because you need to have that serious working knowledge of the first game to really understand who some of these people are and what their motivations are and references and all that stuff. And I would even go as far as to say that you need to have a little bit of working knowledge of Control as well. The FBC, the Federal Bureau of Control, is a somewhat central part of the game, at least from the second half on. And Ati the janitor is a major character in Control, and so you kind of need to know a lot of these things. They talk about this Remedy connected universe, and they are straight up full in on that, because this is becoming much like the Marvel stuff, where if you didn't watch all those Marvel movies, there are going to be references that you do not understand, and that leaves you kind of out of the loop, or at least feeling like you're out of the loop. And so I think that those things kind of combined, it doesn't surprise me when they say that it sold poorly, but, hopefully they turn around, and more people, there's, some groundswell building, as people are doing their Game of the Year lists. I know it made Game of the Year at a couple of different places, so hopefully that'll help bring some new people in. But I enjoyed my time with the game, and I am enjoying my time with Control as well.
Wonderful. Another mindfuck game. Aren't you damaged enough? Is your goal to be a puddle of skin and pie melting into a rainbow couch sent down from the sky pyramid?
Did you find ayahuasca somewhere? Like, what is up with you? Awesome. All right. We did actually have a pair of new releases come out since the last time you and I spoke in this podcast format. The finals, I guess, will be the first one that we get into. There's a video up on the channel of a couple of rounds of gameplay. My overall thoughts on the game, is I just don't think, as it stands right now, with the version we have to play right now, I don't think it has the legs to really become the next big first-person shooter in the multiplayer competitive landscape. I think it only has 2 game modes, and they are very similar to each other. It needs some other stuff. And I'm not saying that they need to like radically change what that game is and turn it into like a battle royale or something like that, but it needs like team deathmatch and some of these kind of like standard things that a competitive shooter has, because it's you could say, well, like, hey, some of these other games like Fortnite and Apex, they don't really have team deathmatch. Yeah, but they're a battle royale thing is kind of like its own thing. Like, it's okay with just being that one thing. And I know I've never played Fortnite, but I used to play Apex, and I know at times Apex did have other game modes that would come in for like seasonal events, so they certainly weren't adverse to doing it. But I think the finals, with the way the game plays and the destructibility and all that stuff, which is something that people have been longing for to be included in a first-person shooter game for quite some time, ever since like the Bad Company games, is like, man, give us like a domination mode, or like, man, a capture the flag mode. They already had the mechanic of going to get the vault thing and running away with it to try and cash it out. Like, get us old school capture the flag. Like, just get some of these extra things in there, and I think people would really, really enjoy it. I like the look of the game. I like the feel of the game. I do think that some of the map layout is a little rough. That it's very easy to fall off the side of a building and just die. And especially with having a 15 to 20 second respawn timer, makes things a little difficult at times. But the biggest thing that game needs is a mini map. Going in blind to a new first-person shooter and you have no idea how to maneuver these maps, and especially when they do have pitfalls that you can fall off of and die, like, you need to have a mini-map. Like, there are times where people are just running around trying to figure out where to go and how to get there. And, obviously, if you keep playing the game, you're gonna learn some layouts and memorize things. But it's not necessarily the greatest first impression in the world. But I am excited to see what the game becomes. If they can find enough of a fan base that they can financially stabilize and continue to work on the game and continue to put out new maps, new content, whatever it may be, I would be very interested in checking in on the game again in 6 months or a year or whatever it may be. Right now, I'm not going to keep playing it because I'm very invested in Call of Duty. I'm really, really enjoying my time with Modern Warfare 3. So I'm not going to play 2 first-person shooters at the same time. It's just kind of not my thing. I kind of find my one and stick with it. And so, but that's not to say that I'm not going to keep paying attention to the finals and see where they end up, because I want to see what they do. I think that they have some cool ideas, and, I hope nothing but success for the game. But as it stands right now, it's just not something that I am going to invest my time in. But because it is free to play, I do recommend checking it out, because it may be exactly what you're looking for. I can certainly see it finding an audience. It's just that I'm not part of that audience, And then the other big release lately, House Flipper 2. Again, another, we took a look at that on the channel, so there's a video there if you want to get a little bit of an idea of what that game's about. That game is Europe's idea of how Americans live, and just vomit all over the place, questionable stains of unknown origin all over pool tables and ceilings, and coming down windowsills, and I mean coming down windowsills. There's a lot going on in that game, but I am quite enjoying it. I actually haven't gotten a chance to play more of it since I recorded the video. I just recorded the video yesterday, for me, but, I recorded it on Friday. Yeah, that's right. So I haven't played in a couple days, but, I am going to spend more time with it this week. I am excited to play more. It's just one of those games that you can just kind of chill out with, you can tell from watching the video, there's very little in the way of music. It's kind of there, but it's really low in the mix, and there's, you know, some sound effects when you're scrubbing or picking up garbage and things like that. But I mean, that's the kind of game, you know, you put on mute and just kind of watch your own thing, listen to your own thing, and I think you'll have a good time. I definitely recommend it. If you like the first one, then you're definitely gonna like this one. I don't see why you wouldn't. You know, I haven't gotten super deep into it to see if there's really any big changes to it. There are some minor changes with some UI stuff, some quality of life things, some functions, like I said in the video, like in the first game, you needed to use this one particular tool to pick up one particular thing, but now you can use another tool to pick up this one thing, but it will also do another thing, so they kind of combine functions into things, and that kind of just, you know, I think it gives you a little bit more variety at the onset of the game, because you are having to unlock these other abilities, and you are leveling up those abilities. Like one of the I think the best examples from the first game was, you know, when you paint a wall, you know, you kind of paint these rectangular strips. Well, then you could paint like 3 rectangular strips at once, and so you could just paint faster. So you're leveling up your skills in that regard. But you have to even level up in the game just by unlocking levels to even get to the point where you get your first job where they're asking you to paint, and then you'll have the ability to paint. So, you know, you kind of start small with picking stuff up, you know, organizing some things, unpacking some boxes and stuff like that. And you'll eventually, you know, work your way up to doing other things. But I have enjoyed what I have played of it so far, and it's definitely on the list for this week. I have a very busy week coming up this week, so I don't know how much time I'll be able to spend with games, but I'm sure I will be playing more House Flipper 2 for certain.
I like this game. I figure if the acting thing doesn't work out, I can become the next Vanilla Ice and get a reality show flipping houses. Also, if you're doing all this construction work, shouldn't you be wearing your doctor-prescribed hard hat? Pretty sure I saw paperwork in a locked drawer that said you suffer from a condition called cottage cheese skull.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. I don't have any locked drawers with medical paperwork, and what the fuck is cottage cheese skull? I think you have cottage cheese skull. We'll be back in a moment with the news. E3 is dead. It is official. You know, they canceled this year's, and we talked about it on a podcast earlier this year. And I believe I said at the time that I didn't expect it to come back anytime soon, but it is official that it is not coming back now or ever. They released a statement, paraphrasing from that statement. This is from E3's president, or I'm sorry, the president of the ESA, which is the body that puts on the E3. Stanley Pierre-Louis, or maybe it's Pierre-Louis. After more than 2 decades of hosting an event that has served as a central showcase for the U.S. and global video game industry, the ESA has decided to end E3. We know the entire industry, players and creators alike, have a lot of passion for E3. We share that passion. We know it's difficult to say goodbye to such a beloved event, but it's the right thing to do given the new opportunities our industry has to reach fans and partners. So E3 has been going on since 1995. When I was a child growing up, it was the biggest deal in the world, especially because it was closed to the public. You know, you were, at least for someone like me that grew up wanting to do something with video games, you know, I was always insanely jealous of those that got to go to E3 and see all these games early and go behind the scenes. And, you know, obviously, as an adult, now you realize that, like, you know, a lot of times it was kind of mismanaged and, you know, it was difficult, and you'd see an appointment and the game would suck, and you'd have to be like, oh, yeah, no, that looks great, you know. Definitely listen to a lot of retrospective podcasts by people that were at early E3s or just at a lot of E3s in general to kind of pick up on the general vibe. But, you know, E3 brought about a lot of memories, a lot of very formative gaming memories, a lot of the most iconic memories and moments in video game history happened to E3, where there was a game announcement or something that got memed to death, or a console announcement, or any of those things. You know, it was a very important thing, but in a digital age where, you know, companies don't need to pay money to the ESA to have the right to go and show their games. You know, they could just make a YouTube video and announce their games, or do something like Keighley Summer Game Fest, or the commercial, you know, all the not commercials, the trailers we saw at the Game Awards a couple weeks ago. You know, there are just it's just a different world now, and it's just easier to put together a YouTube video to do things. I mean, we're still getting the great game announcements, but we are losing out on some of those live moments and stuff that I really enjoyed. But it's sad to see it kind of go out like this. There were a lot of just weird things towards the end. Obviously COVID was a big thing, shutting it down, and then they like sold it off to the people that run PAX, which is Reed Pop, and just like a whole bunch of stuff that kind of went on, and it just got kind of passed around, and it just became one of those things where it's just like, this is just kind of like a name only now. I don't think this thing is ever coming back. And at this point, we already kind of have a replacement with Summer Game Fest. Are we never ever going to have an event again called E3? I don't know about that. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody at some point scoops up the name and does something with it. Is it going to be a large scale in-person thing? Probably not. I think that would be cool, but I don't think that's a thing that's going to happen anytime soon. I think if it ever did become an in-person thing again, because the large video game companies just have no interest in doing it. It had been years, even in the last several E3s, it had been years since like Sony or Microsoft or Electronic Arts or any of those big companies where, the green screen stuff is just going wild today. Any of those companies had been involved. So I think if it ever does come back, it's going to be less of a trade show and more like a PAX. I think it would be a place it wouldn't necessarily be an industry event. It would be an event open to the public where, indie games are there that you can get hands-on with. Maybe some of the bigger companies will send somebody there with copies of the game and people can play stuff. But I think it would be not necessarily single-player games. I think it would be like maybe Call of Duty brings their game and you can check it out, or if an ongoing game has a big update coming out, maybe they get hands on with that and try and get some people to play the game. I think it's going to be something more along the lines of PAX. Maybe they can, or even they could go the opposite direction and kind of turn it back into an industry event. And instead of it being about game reveals, maybe they turn it into like a TED Talk kind of thing and they open that up to the public, and you get to have like great video game writers or directors or designers like do a little bit of a stage show and do a Q&A and stuff like that. Like that would actually be like pretty cool, to have people doing maybe like retrospectives, like get some of the people that were, get like John Romero up there to give a speech or something to that effect. Get Ken Levine to talk about, how we came across or how we came up with BioShock and, things like that. I think that could be an interesting concept, and that might be a big enough event that they could live stream it, but also open it up to the public and charge admission to it and all that stuff and kind of turn it into more of like a convention. So I think that if we ever see E3 again, that's what we're going to see. I think the days of it being a place where the industry gets together to do preview events and do trailers and world premieres and all that stuff, I think that's pretty much over with. I think that's all pretty much gone digital, with the exception of what Keeley's doing. And, who knows how long he's going to want to keep doing that. I mean, maybe he wants to do it forever, and maybe he doesn't. Maybe he wants to hand it off to somebody, or maybe eventually he's going to realize that all the backlash he gets every single time he runs an event just isn't worth it in the long run. Who knows? But the Game Awards were super successful. They said it was 118 million people tuned in to watch overall. So I mean, they're obviously doing something right there. But it is sad that E3 is out. But I think we already did our grieving process earlier this year when it was canceled, and I think at that time everybody pretty much knew that it was over and done with. All right, moving on to our next story. Some controversy, if I feel like I got punched in the jaw. I'm through the wire. I'm wrapping through the wire now. I don't know what's going on. The day before, there's a lot of stuff going on with the day before. So it was a game. I had heard of the game. I had no idea what it was. I didn't realize it was like an MMO kind of thing. I just thought it was just like sometimes, there are still games that come out that are only on the PC, most of which are very bizarre. But there are some that are somewhat of a larger stature that do come out and they're only on the PC. And I was like, oh, I guess it just must be one of those, and it's just their version of like The Last of Us or something, because I think I remember reading somewhere that it had a zombie thing going on in it. Well, it came out and it was a mess. It was just a bad game in general. And then the studio shut down a couple of days later and was basically like, we got your money, we're going away. We don't have any funds to continue making the game. The game failed and we're done. But also we're changing our name. And we might still be around. And we're just, nobody has your money, but we have enough money to keep going under a different name. This is definitely not a scam. Okay, bye. And so the game got pulled down from Steam. You could no longer buy it. It sounds like Steam ended up giving people refunds, even though they had played more. I think, what is it, like 2 hours on Steam? I've never had to do a refund through Steam, but I think it's like if you play the game for less than 2 hours on Steam, you can get a refund. And I think they kind of like were like, no, if you just bought the game, you can get a refund. The only article I have on this is from a few days ago, so I don't think it has the most up-to-date information. I couldn't really find exactly what was going on, but there, as it stands right now at least, but the game was pulled. Fantastic. The company that put the game out, they released an official statement that says, today we announce a closure of Fantastic Studio. Unfortunately, the day before has failed financially. We lack the funds to continue. All income received is being used to pay off debts to our partners. We invested all of our efforts, resources, and man hours into the development of the day before, which was our first huge game. We really wanted to release new patches to reveal the full potential of the game, but unfortunately we don't have the funding to continue the work. And then they continue for a couple more lines, but they put out this weird like timetable, and it's like 2015 we opened the studio, 2017 we put out a game, 2018 we put out a game, 2018 we put out another game, 2021 we put out another game, 2023 we put out the day before, we're done. Like, it was just like, okay. And if you look at like the comments on Twitter and the comments on like YouTube videos and stuff, it's just like, what did you people expect? Like, this game is horrible. It's been covered to death. If you go on YouTube, I think like Donkey made a video on it. Charlie, the Moist Critical there, made a video on it, and you can definitely get some more in-depth coverage from them. I think I know Donkey at least actually played it. His video was pretty good about it. His stuff is kind of hit or miss with me. But I thought his video was actually pretty. I think you should watch that if you want a good idea of what this game is, because this game looks, I don't know if I would say unfinished, but just like, we have the skeleton of a game and people recorded dialogue. That's it. Enjoy. Like, that's like, it's like really bizarre. Yeah, the whole thing seems like a scam. Like, why would they even try putting out this game if they barely had enough money to get by? Like, what did they expect was going to happen? Like, just putting this game out was going to solve all their financial problems? Like, that's not how that works, And it's just kind of a mess, but, it's funny that these days these things still happen and people fall for these things and they get all excited about something and buy into the hype, and then they get it and it's just like, here's a potato with a gun and this is your zombie game, and, go enjoy. But hopefully if you bought the game and you're watching, you got your money back, because you deserve it after spending your money on that. But you also might want to start questioning your life decisions. Number one, why are you listening to this? And number two, why are you buying the day before and spending your money on it? But yeah, hopefully everybody gets their money back.
Getting lied to and getting ripped off is a way of life. You don't think I'm watering down those cokes before I dump them off on a bunch of stupid moose-loving Canadians? Do you actually think the blue jeans I sell out of the back of my van are actually denim? Does anyone actually think this video game looked legit?
Okay. You're on one today, man. Jesus. All right. Next up, Spider-Man has been hacked. Insomniac apparently got hacked, the studio that makes Ratchet & Clank and the Spider-Man games. It says, article is coming from Ethan Gatch over at Kotaku. It says, ransomware operator Resida, R-H-Y-S-I-D-A, Resida, recently posted what it claimed were leaked materials, including internal documents, internal emails and personal employee information, as it had proof it had Insomniac. Sony confirmed the security breach, but said it had no reason to believe that the attacks had impacted any of its other subsidiaries. In the meantime, fans on Reddit have been looking into some of the leaked documents for clues about what the studio is working on outside of their announced Wolverine game. There are people that believe now, because of all this, that they are working on not just just another Spider-Man 3, which we already know that they're going to do Spider-Man 3, and probably another Miles Morales type stopgap game, but also that they are doing something related to the Spider-Verse. So there's something in the document that says additional support for Spider-Verse. I don't think that that's talking about them making a Spider-Verse game. I think that's probably them talking about the fact that they supplied assets to Sony Animation for the inclusion of the Insomniac Spider-Man character in the last Spider-Verse movie, and maybe he comes back for another cameo or a larger role in the next Spider-Verse movie that they are, that is being worked on. I think that that's what that is. I don't think it's likely that they're doing that, because there's an interview with Brian Intihar where he got asked about the Spider-Verse stuff, because there is a small Spider-Verse tie-in in Spider-Man 2 if you... I don't want to spoil it, but there's one of the side quests that you can do in the game that has a tie-in to the Spider-Verse movies. And he was asked about that, and he's like, no, we keep that stuff separate. That's their thing. We're kind of doing our thing. And I believe him on that. I take him at face value. I think that they have a very steady plan for what they are doing. Spider-Man 2 ends on a cliffhanger. They're obviously setting up Spider-Man 3, and we already know that they're working on Spider-Man 3. I don't think they're working on a Spider-Verse game. So I think that kind of solves that. But there were people that were looking at leaked screenshots of Wolverine. I didn't see them. I actually haven't been able to find where they are, because most reputable news sites aren't going to link to them. But I imagine the game looks good. Insomniac is an amazing developer, and I think them doing Wolverine makes sense. And I have every confidence that they are going to make a really impressive Wolverine game. One thing that's in there that I thought was interesting is... there was something that pointed to the game coming out in 2024. I am fairly positive that they already said publicly that Wolverine was a 2025 game, but maybe I'm wrong on that one, but I'm fairly certain that they said 2025 for Wolverine. But maybe not. They are a multi-team studio, so that game could be a lot farther along than we realize, and maybe they do Wolverine 2 in October, November, whatever of next year, and we get the stopgap Spider-Man, Miles Morales 2 or whatever it is in 2025. But I have to imagine one way or another they are going to do that combination of Wolverine and whatever mini Spider-Man game. Would probably be a 1-2 punch. I would be surprised if it's 2024 and 2025 and not 25 and 26. Maybe, because I would assume 2028 is when they're hoping for Spider-Man 3. Maybe they try and go for 2027. It was 5 years in between Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. If they do 5 years again, that's 2028. Who knows? Maybe they have more resources. Maybe because Sony is understanding that they are kind of the heavy hitter that they have going on right now with, Naughty Dog not up to much publicly. They obviously are working on stuff, but they don't have anything on the calendar right now, at least a public calendar. Maybe internally it's like, hey, Last of Us Part 3 is coming out in 2025 or whatever, who knows? But, with Santa Monica saying that they're probably going to take a step back from God of War, I assume Ghost of Tsushima 2 is being worked on. I don't know what Bend is working on. But Spider-Man's kind of their chief moneymaker right now, both critically and, commercially. It's rave reviews, pretty much across the board. So, we'll see what happens. I of course, am eagerly awaiting Wolverine and Spider-Man, aside from, I guess, or Grand Theft Auto 6, probably my most anticipated, game. I just don't want to see them get rushed, due to contractual stuff. But I don't think Sony doesn't really have a habit of doing that. That's much more of an EA thing, at least back in the day. They don't really do it anymore because they don't really have anything to rush these days. But we shall see. But if more details come out, I guess we'll cover them on a future episode. All right. On kind of the negative side of things, for the longest time, people were hoping that we were going to get either a remake, remaster, or just a straight up new game in the Timesplitters franchise. And the studio Free Radical had been working on that, but the Embracer Group, who embraced them and purchased them, has been in an absolute free fall this year after really overspending and banking essentially all of their future on this Saudi Arabia money that fell through. They've been closing studios left and right, and now they are closing Free Radical. This is a statement that they issued to VGC. It is with a heavy heart that we must announce yet another difficult decision. Today we have to confirm the official closure of Free Radical Design and say goodbye to many remarkable, talented, and hardworking people. We are beyond grateful for their incredible contributions to Play On and wish them the best of luck and success on their professional journey from here on out. I saw it last night, or maybe it was this morning on Reddit, that a lot of the artists that were working on the new Timesplitters have started to post concept art and just straight up like what the game was pretty much going to look like. Usually you don't see that stuff because there's NDAs, but I'm starting to believe that maybe that's just not the case with this. Usually that is stuff that you would show privately in a job interview. But, you know, it's certainly been circulating, and they were doing some impressive work. So hopefully those people don't have a hard time finding a job. But the video game industry right now, to say that it is essentially like walking on quicksand is, you know, putting it lightly. You know, I think the numbers came out. It was about 9,000 jobs were cut this year in the world of video games. So it's an incredibly competitive market to get into. And even if you do get into it, there's no guarantee that you are going to last. Many people will work on one game for a studio and get let go because they're on a contract basis. And then they might struggle to find another job somewhere else. There's not a whole lot of lifers anymore in the video game industry. When you look at some of the people that have been doing this for a really long time, it's people that got in on the ground floor, you know, 15, 20, even 30 years ago. You know, it's difficult to really make a sustainable long-term living in this industry. And you see stories about people that do find the way to bounce from job to job. Well, not all those jobs are gonna be in the same city. So you may work on a game for 2-3 years and then you got to move, and then work on a game for 2-3 years, then you got to move. And that's hard to put down roots, and that's hard to live a somewhat normal life at times. So it is difficult. I wasn't, you know, one of the people that was really looking forward to Timesplitters. I remember Timesplitters was a very big deal. And people were super into it. I never played it. If I did, it would have been something that I rented for like a weekend, but I genuinely don't remember ever playing it, so I don't think that I did. But I know people were super into it, and I remember when I worked at a video game store that specialized in like retro games, we used to get a lot of people asking for the GameCube Timesplitters. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I remember that was like a really highly requested title, and if we got a copy in, it wouldn't last very long. I don't remember it being particularly like valuable from a monetary standpoint, but I know that there are people that were like super into that game, and it definitely had a following. So, you know, it's another one of those games that had like a big cult status. That I just, some of these games, you know, we are kind of in that GameCube generation right now for the people that are kind of trying to relive their childhood. You know, that was like their childhood system. And a lot of those games, if you look at like what game design was back in the early to mid 2000s, a lot of those things just don't fly anymore. They've kind of been replaced or refined to a degree that they are just something completely different. I'm sorry, my dog is acting like a psychopath upstairs. I'm just going to check, see if there's anything going on outside. I know we have to do this all the time. And by checking the security cameras, there's absolutely nothing happening in front of my house. So who knows? But there's a lot of games from that time period that I get have this like big fan base that I think people always feel like, oh, I just want that game again. Like, why don't they make a new one? But it's not the game that they want. They want that experience, that memory that's associated with it. That's essentially what nostalgia is, right? And when I was working at that video game store, I remember we used to sell like Ataris, and we would always tell people like, hey, store credit only if you return this. There is no cash return on used merchandise. Store credit only. Please be sure you actually want this. And people that would be like, oh, I want to buy GoldenEye. And it's like, nobody wants to play GoldenEye. All these people that talk about how great GoldenEye was. The game is not that great when you play it these days. It's actually like a pretty rough game. You want that experience. You want that experience of being in your dorm room playing the multiplayer with your buddies on the N64, or if you weren't college age, like playing in the living room with your buddies at a sleepover when you were in junior high or high school or even elementary school or whatever it was. And that's what you want back. You don't actually want the game back. And that's why we see so many of these things just fail and flop. You know, we get all these like random ass remasters, like Turok got a remaster. I think they even remastered like Turok 2. And it's like, who wants to play Turok in 2023? Like, you just want that time in your life back. You want the less complicated version of you back in your life. And I get it. I feel that same way. I long for those days. Man, my life fucking sucks for the most part. And of course I would love to go back in time 15 years where I had a hell of a lot less problems and make different decisions, or just live in that time infinitely where I was like somewhat borderline happy. Like, of course I would love to do that, but getting a new Timesplitters isn't going to do that for me. You are, whether you like it or not, you are forced to live in the now. So it doesn't surprise me when stuff like this happens, especially when it's a studio that's focusing on bringing back a very minor cult game. Let's be honest. Let's not make Timesplitters out to be bigger than it was. It was a minor cult title. It's not something that the masses are clamoring for. But all that being said, absolutely brutal for these people, but it does look like that they were doing some really good work. So hopefully they find new positions somewhere, because it looks like they would be an absolute asset to anybody that can bring them on board. So I wish nothing but the best for them. And last up, our friends over at Naughty Dog have officially canceled The Last of Us Online. So we've known for a while that this online game was coming. They showed it off by just like some art. I don't even know what you would call it, key art or something like that. At was it last year's, the 2022 Summer Game Fest, I think, when they had Druckmann on stage to talk about the television show, and he was like, "Yeah, we're working on this multiplayer thing," and it sounds like over the past year or even 2 years, the amount of people actually working on the game internally has really ticked down and down and down and down and down. And Neil Druckmann made a statement, I can't remember if it was last year or this year, he was like, we're not announcing what the game is, but we have made our decision for what the next game Naughty Dog will be putting out is. So it was like, okay, well, they are a big enough studio and an important enough studio that they could probably work on more than one project at a time, but obviously they decided to change their mind on that and cut ties with this online game. So this was from a statement that they put out. It says, "There's no easy way to say this. We made the incredibly difficult decision to stop development on that game," mentioning The Last of Us Online. They never actually officially called it The Last of Us Online. That's just what everybody's been calling it. It says, "We know this news will be tough for many, especially our dedicated The Last of Us factions community," that was the online component of the original Last of Us, "who have been following our multiplayer ambitions ardently. We're equally crushed at the studio, so we were looking forward to putting it in your hands. We wanted to share with you some background of how we came to this decision," and it goes on and on from there. So I think that it's probably the smartest move that they could do right now. It sounds like it was going to be a live service game. There was a leaked screenshot. I don't know if this was real or not. I did see this, where it did say Battle Pass on it. And I believe that it probably would have been a live service game. Sony has really been pushing for live service stuff. What is it? They have something like over a dozen live service games currently in development at Sony-owned studios. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were putting some pressure on them to add that aspect to the game, because if you can make it hit, a live service game can bring in a lot of money for a studio or a lot of money for a publisher. But I don't know. I don't really see that as Naughty Dog's strong suit. Like, they have done multiplayer in the past, and I actually really enjoyed the Uncharted multiplayer. I actually had quite a bit of fun playing. I thought it was really well made. I never touched any of the Last of Us stuff, but I know that it does have a very dedicated audience that really did enjoy the game. But I think this is more indicative of most likely pressure that Naughty Dog is feeling from HBO and from Sony as a whole to continue in on The Last of Us. And I do believe that the next game that they are going to release will be The Last of Us 3, and I think that will wrap up the story. The show was such a huge hit. It's nominated, the Emmy nominations just came out, and it's nominated for a bunch of awards. In some categories I think they have multiple people nominated in a couple of the categories. And I'm sorry, those are the Golden Globes. When the Emmys come out, because the Emmys are television focused, they will be nominated across the board as well. So I think that there's probably some pressure, like, hey, we need to kind of capitalize on this. And if The Last of Us, the HBO has said that the next season of The Last of Us is 2025. Is that enough time? The Last of Us Part 2 came out in 2020. 2025 would be 5 years. Do we get The Last of Us 3 around the time the show comes out? I think that's a possibility. I think that could be a thing, absolutely. But I'm fairly certain that that's what their next game is going to be. Beyond that, of course, me being an Uncharted fan, I would love to see them go back to the well with Uncharted. I think probably most people would say no to that. They would like to see something new, and I would also like to see them do something new as well, just to kind of build up their legacy and be like, hey, we are more than these 2 games that we are known for. For most people, obviously, they had a long history before that. They made Crash, they made Jack, all that stuff. But I'd like to see them introduce something new in maybe down the line at some point, even if Sony gives it to another studio, which I think would be tough because then maybe it wouldn't feel the same. Doing that last or Uncharted follow up with Drake and oh my God, why am I forgetting her name? Not Elena, their daughter, and do something kind of cool with that. I know, of course, that would obviously give a lot of Tomb Raider comparisons, but Tomb Raider's not real. It's not a thing anymore, right? Nobody cares about Tomb Raider. But yeah, it sucks that the game is canceled for the most part, but I also think probably for the right reasons and probably the best idea for them, and they can focus back on what they do best, the single player stuff.
No one wants to play online games these days. It's all about isolating yourself in a cocoon made up of empty soda bottles, boxes of Cheez-Its, and unrequited love. Single depressed people want single depressed games.
That is true. I am depressed people, and I want depressed games. No, I like fun too. I like fun. I want fun. I don't want all Alan Wake all the time. I want colors. I'm wearing yellow. I'm fun. I'm hip. I'm with it. But that's going to wrap it up. So on the channel this week, probably not a lot. There's a couple of games that came out, one of which is Cookie Cutter, that I'm thinking about making a video of, so maybe we'll see that. But for the most part, I may take this week off. I have a lot going on on the personal side of things, and I also need to get back to working on the next animated video. I took last week off just because last week was so busy with multiple shorts and doing the year-end stuff and having to get everything edited and doing the videos for House Flipper and the finals and all that stuff. So I think maybe this week will be a good opportunity to kind of catch up on some of the stuff that came out on the channel over the past week. But yeah, that's pretty much going to do it for me. Christian, anything you want to leave us with before we head out? I am afraid to see what you're going to say next.
We're done, right? I have to catch a ferry. I'll be back in a few days. Just don't call.
Well, don't come back. I won't call and you don't come back. We have an agreement on that. And also, there is no ferry anywhere. There's no ferry around here. Okay. That's going to do it for me. We'll see you again real soon.